All right, so for today, day 2 of our design workshop, we're going to talk about how you read a script. Now, for some of you, you might be going, it's words on a page. You look at them and your brain processes them, and that's how you read a script, which is not inaccurate in and of itself. But there's more to it than that when you are reading it as a designer. So design language is what we're going to talk about first. So we're going to talk about what we talked about yesterday. So the first one of the ones that was submitted, and I liked it a lot, was from Mac. Thank you, Mac. A small public restroom set in the present day in a restaurant or club. The tiles, sink, and soap dispenser look as if they haven't been properly cleaned under the artificial green light. The light is focused on a disheveled girl distracted by her reflection in a grimy mirror while cleaning her hands, maybe doing some self-reflection of feeling regret. So try to picture that scene in your mind just from the descriptive text we've got there. Think about what the different things mean to you in your experience and how you would visually process that scene, right? And then I will show you the image that Mac submitted with that. So in terms of the design, I think Mac did a really good job of encapsulating what's in this image. We have the time period, we have the feel of the scene, the color, texture, movement, all of those sorts of things are encompassed in Mac's description of this scene, down to both the grimy window and, you sort of get a picture of the person in the mirror looking at herself in that mirror and what her emotions are. It's a very emotionally fraught scene, which is what we want in theater. We want to connect to people on an emotional level as well as through the script and everything. Some of the things you can see in this picture is you've got the texture, the tiles, how they're not completely even. There's different gaps and different spaces in them potentially. The mirror is dirty, it's outset from the wall. You've got almost complete darkness on her, and in fact the actual person in the picture is not the focus of the picture, but rather her reflection is. So these are all techniques you can use as a designer to sort of emphasize the mood and the feeling and everything that you're going for. Does that make sense for everyone? So I'm going to read a couple more that were sent to me real quick and see if you can get a feel for what the scene was. So one of them, a narrow street, buildings lining both sides. A tea store and a New Inns sign are hung on the wall of two of them by a metal pole. Ivy covered the sides of some buildings. People moved down the road with horses and donkeys, luggage loaded onto the animals' backs. And that one's from Gwen. Gwen did not send me the picture that they had in mind, but that's okay. I think the whole idea of the exercise is to use the text to process the feel of it. So there's the narrow street with the buildings. The sign gives you an idea of what it is, how it's set up. You've got ivy covering the sides of some of the buildings, so that gives you a feel for the scene. People moving on the road with horses and donkeys. That not only gives you sort of a feel to the scene, but a kind of a time period reference as well. And then luggage loaded onto the animals' backs. That tells you that, the horses and donkeys that are moving through aren't just, there as the day. It's not a day-to-day scene necessarily. There's a movement of something beyond just the people. They're moving goods, they're moving materials, they're moving whatever. So that could be like going to a market, or it could be, people, refugees, depending on what the scene is and what the story is behind it. It tells you more about the scene. And the next one An expansive, gray, and grimy battlefield sprinkled with a mixture of dead bodies and others fighting to stay alive. The time period is 1915, a little over a year into the First World War. This takes place on the British side, more specifically on the western front of the battle. This area itself is both muddy, damp, and colorless, along with bits of metal from bullets and torn structures. The view beyond this is mostly uncertain, with smoke billowing in the distance and nothing but ashen skies to show for the conflict at hand. Again, a very strong image portrayed. You've got a time period, you've got the specifics that it's a battlefield, that things are gray, grimy, there's no clean texture, there's no, everything about it is harsh, and the view beyond is as Ashar said, uncertain. You don't know what is beyond this element, and that sort of can help bring your audience into that same feel of being unsure of, like, the characters being unsure of what's next, what the potentials are, what the world around them looks like, and what's next for them. So these are all great examples. I hope the rest of you have some examples too, and if you want to email those to me, I would love to give you some feedback, or if you want to share them, you can let me know in the chat and I will be glad to have you do that. Otherwise, I think all three of those were really good submissions for evocative language that really puts across the idea you're trying to get, gives your audience, who in this case would be the other people you're working with, an idea of what your concept for the design is. So before we move on, anybody have any questions? All right, so we're going to talk about how to read a script as a designer. So the process of reading a script as a designer is different than your process if you're directing or you're acting or you're just reading the script for the sake of reading the script because you enjoy reading scripts. You're approaching it from a different point of view. So as you read the script, you're looking for specific things when you're reading it as a designer. The one thing to remember is the only time you will experience your show the way your audience will experience it is the very first time you read the script. Your audience is coming in not knowing the story necessarily, not knowing the world that you're going to be bringing them. Obviously, if you're doing a big, well-known show like Les Mis, your audience may have a preset conception. They may have seen other productions of it. They may have seen, they may have read the book or listened to the soundtrack 1,000 times, but your production of it is going to be a new experience for them that they've never had before. So the very first time you read a script is the only time you have that sort of sense of, I don't know what's next. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what this world is. So the first time you read the script, don't read it as a designer, is my recommendation. So the first time you read the script, read it as an audience member. Don't try and start designing the show your first time through. Don't worry about, if you're the lighting designer, what a given scene is going to look like. What is it going to, what instruments am I going to need to light this? Where are the people on stage? That sort of thing. That reading should be just getting to know the script. All right. The second time you read, you'll read it as a craftsperson, a technician, somebody there, looking for those things that have to be there. And then the third time through, read it with a designer's eye. You're looking for moods and feelings and that sort of thing, which we'll get to shortly. All right. Any questions? All right. So when you read it the first time as an audience member, so to speak, you're looking at the story, the mood, the characters, the same way you read any other written thing that you're reading for, the purposes of learning from it, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever. you're getting to know the story. You're getting to know what the feel of the story is, what the mood of the story is, who the characters are. You're kind of meeting the people and you're encountering the world of this show for the very first time. So you're just getting to know the script, right? Does that make sense? So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to read a script. This is a real short one act called I Can't Think of It Right Now. And I need to, oh, neat. That wasn't what I was expecting to show up on the screen, but it'll work. Can you guys read that? Let me try actually do a couple more clicks that will help. Is it better? Sort of, Colby says. Let me see if I can make the view bigger. Probably this button over here with the percent. Let's see. There. How's that? All right. Could I get a couple of volunteers to read the script? One person for John and one person for Marcia. You don't have to turn on your okay. You don't have to turn on your camera. Just unmute your mic for them. So Ellie, and who wants to read the other part? Oh, come on, someone be brave. Colby says it's still blurry.
He's making excuses. Just read it.
Let me actually, I can hear.
Can you just like share it?
Yep. Oh. I'm going to put the link into the chat. That should work. All right, that should. That should give you guys access to it. All right, I guess unless we've got another volunteer. Colby, are you volunteering?
Who am I reading for? John?
Sure. With this script, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference, but okay. And I will scroll along as we go. So whenever you're ready. So this is I Can't Think of It Right Now by Nick Zagoni. John, middle-aged, sits on a living room chair, his face in a laptop. Marcia, also middle-aged, sits curled up on the couch with a good book. It's evening. Their son has just been put to bed. There's a baby monitor on the table between them. After a beat, Marcia looks up to John.
It was the cutest thing today. I forgot to tell you. When I picked up Timmy from the preschool, the whole class was finger painting, you know?
Really?
Just making a mess.
Yeah, I bet.
Anyway, when I got there, Timmy had this big blue paint streak down his face. He looked like, you know, that movie. I can't think of it right now. In Scotland.
What movie?
In Scotland with the swords.
Highlander?
What's his name?
You look like Highlander.
No, you know.
Highlander.
No, not Highlander, the other Scottish movie.
Oh, I know. Shrek.
No.
No, that's not what I meant. Shakespeare, right?
No.
Henry V?
Is that Scottish? Come on.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, with a...
Oh, did we lose Colby?
I think so.
All right, I will continue with John. Pocahontas?
What? With Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson.
That's it.
He looked like Mel Gibson?
Yeah, in the movie with the Scottish movie with the blue face paint, battling on the moors.
Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson?
Don't tell me you don't remember Mel Gibson.
No.
You know, he was the crazy guy in that one, and it had all the gunfights.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know?
Dirty Harry?
No.
Paycheck?
What?
Frantic.
No, you're thinking the other guy.
In the Line of Fire?
No.
I had a crazy guy with gunfights.
Wrong crazy guy. The other guy.
Die Hard.
No, not that guy. That guy's from
Oh, yeah. That's the guy from
all the Die Hard movies and
Signs.
yeah. No. But yeah. That's the guy I'm talking about.
Bruce Willis.
No. Mel Gibson.
Here, this is ridiculous. I have the internet right here. I'll just IMDb Mel Gibson.
Okay, good idea. God, that was a good movie.
Die Hard?
No, Signs.
Oh, here we go. Internet movie database. Look up Mel Gib. That's weird.
What?
I lost the connection. I'm getting no signal.
Maybe it's the aliens.
Now, you know I don't like that.
Big imagination. Just kidding. Try your iPhone.
All right. So what was the other one I was thinking with Bruce Willis that was like Signs?
I don't know.
The one with the kid who can see ghosts.
Oh.
I see dead people.
Yeah, Ghost.
Ghosts, yeah.
No, I mean that's the title. Ghost.
What? No.
No, I know. Evil Dead.
No.
The Haunting.
No.
I know. Highlander.
Knock it off.
I know, I was just kidding. But we're thinking about my movie now, not your movie. Anything else?
Once I remember my movie, I'll think about your movie. No, nothing.
I know which one you're talking about. I just can't remember the name. The movie I'm talking about, you don't even know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's why we got the iPhone. What's wrong with that thing?
The Sixth Sense.
No, that's...
No, that's the one I was talking about with the kid who can see ghosts.
Oh, good. So it's working. Now look up my Mel Gibson movie.
No, it's not working. No signal at all. I just remembered that one with my own brain.
Well, what's going on?
Whoopi Goldberg.
What?
Whoopi Goldberg was in the other one, who can see ghosts.
Ghost.
No, ghosts. Ghosts, plural.
No, that's what it was called. The title? Ghost.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay, so here we are with Mel Gibson with paint on his face with a broadsword.
Lethal Weapon.
No.
No, that's the one with the crazy guy in gunfights.
Oh, yeah. So it's working?
No.
Well, what are we going to do? Look, you saw this movie with me.
I did?
Didn't you?
I don't think I did because I have no idea what you're talking about.
It won the frickin' Academy Award.
It did?
Yes, battles, blood, he has a speech, you know, blah, blah, but they can never take away our dignity, something like that.
Clint Eastwood.
What?
He was in Dirty Harry. That's the other guy I was thinking about. Go ahead.
Forget it. I'm going to go to the computer, DSL. I gotta figure this out, or I'm getting a divorce. Your brain seems to conveniently remember every movie but the one I need to know. It's highly suspicious if you ask me. Ah, shoot.
What?
I can't go upstairs. I'll wake up,
Who?
our child, the boy,
Oh yeah, upstairs in bed. What's his name? My son. What's happening to me?
Tommy? No, oh God.
Bobby? No.
You know, shoot, look it up, hurry.
I can't. I can see his face, but
With the blue streak of paint across his head. Oh no, it's the aliens.
What? Don't. Stop it. No.
Oh God, I find some pictures or
Oh yeah, thingy on the thing. Oh, a what?
What?
Something with his name.
For God's sake, check the computer.
It doesn't. I can't remember.
We can. What?
Nothing. I was just. Yeah, we can.
Look up.
What?
Yeah, to find.
Yeah, to find that thing that
Yeah, the thing that we left.
left.
That we didn't.
Find out. Braveheart. Lights up full. John and Marcia cry with happiness, heavy breathing, laughing, and smiling until we hear a crying from the baby monitor. They hold their breath and turn to look at it. Slow out. End of play.
How come you always choose aliens, Mr. Evans?
I suspect it has more to do with people writing short one acts for high school performance, just like aliens. I can't blame them. They're pretty entertaining.
That's fair.
So, anyway, now I'm assuming none of you have encountered that script before. I don't believe it is a well-known and frequently produced production. So, you encountered this script as you do with the first time, like as the audience would. You didn't know what was coming, you didn't know what was going on, you didn't know the world of the show, etc. So in this case, our first reading through, we approach it as an audience member, right? And to that extent, what are we looking for? What is the world of this play? Anyone? What is where is this play set?
Just normal world, it looks like.
Yeah, pretty much up until near the end, everything about it seems fairly normal. It's fairly normal discussion that people have. Pratik says John and Marcia's house. Yeah. Obviously, I think we can say it's a relatively recent time period because they're using IMDb and their iPhone and that sort of thing. It may be a little bit dated because they mentioned DSL, which I don't think a whole lot of people use anymore, but that doesn't really affect much beyond that. Anthony says John and Marcia's house may be in the living room. That seems logical. So we're getting that. Who lives in that world? Well, we know obviously John and Marcia live in that world, and also their son. Pratik says maybe see when the latest movie they mentioned came out. That can be a really good tool. If you look at the dates on the movies that they mention, that gives you a time frame as well. So that gives you, so we know obviously this world is similar to our own because all of the movies and actors they mention are movies and actors that exist in our own day-to-day world. So we know that their world is not that different than we are. And then the last question is sort of, now that we've got that script in our mind, we know the story, we know the background, what do we want the audience to take with them from that world? The idea of doing theater is fundamentally for the audience. Like, we're telling the audience a story, we're giving them something to know about for, you know, whether it's some just entertainment, whether it's, you know, a life lesson or a moral proclamation or whatever, or just to make them think about a given subject. What do we want them to take with from that world? If anybody wants to throw their thoughts into the chat, that would be great. Yeah, I can see it's a little tricky because it's kind of a weird storyline. I think if we think about like where it started out, you know, it's a very normal everyday relationship where one of the people just can't remember. but it sort of builds onto that idea of when you can't remember something, what does that mean when you can't remember a movie? It doesn't have a big impact on your life, but not remembering day-to-day things can have a really big impact, obviously, on your life. Depending on the director's thoughts about the show and that sort of thing, it could be a metaphor for something bigger than just a couple of people trying to remember a movie. So those are the things to think about. When you're doing your first reading, this is your view of the world, right? You're looking at the whole thing. For those of you who don't know, this is the aerial view of Central. But this is way up in the air. You can see the entire campus. You can see the tennis courts, the football field, all of the parking lots, all of that sort of thing. So you've got this very broad overview that you're looking at. You're looking for the world of the story as a whole. Then, after you've read it once, it's usually a good idea to let it sort of sit in your brain for a while and process, go do something else for a bit, because if you try to read it back to back to back, you end up with you'll overload yourself and you'll get bored with it, potentially. So we're in the first reading is your far reaching view of this world. All right, any questions so far? All right, we'll move on to the second reading. So the second reading, you're looking at what we talked about yesterday as driven design, the things that need to be there for the show to work, rather than, running through the whole thing for another 10, 15 minutes. I will pull it back up, but we'll look at just some of the key things you're looking for as a designer when you do that. So we'll pop back over. I'm going to scroll to the top. So like I mentioned yesterday, you usually start out with some level of information from the writer. In this case, you've got, let me see. So John, who is middle-aged, you've got a living room chair. So if you are the props designer, you know you need a chair and you know it needs to be a living room chair. You've got a laptop. You've got Marcia, also middle-aged. So these are the sorts of things, depending on which department you are designing for. If you're designing for lighting, the living room chair probably doesn't matter a whole lot for your initial design concept, but the laptop might. You may want to somehow highlight his face in such a way as to sort of reflect the glow of the screen on it. So Marcia's on the couch with a book. It's evening, so that matters, and then the baby monitor. So right there in those first sentences, we got a lot of information. And as the designer, as you're reading through that, those are the sorts of things you're looking for. If you're the costume designer, you're looking at John and Marcia being middle-aged. They've got a child. From the rest of the script, we know they're a pretty typical couple. So you've got an age range. You've got a look and a feel that you can start thinking about. We know, let's scroll down some more. They mention the iPhone. So we'll scroll down. There's not a whole lot else happening in the other part that directly influences the design. There's not significant time passing. There's not like phone ringing or anything like that. So you're continuing on as a designer. Now, obviously, with a longer script, you would spend more time on this step. You wouldn't just skim it, but we just read it. It's very short, and I've also read it a few extra times before we did this, so I know what I'm looking for. And then we get down here, and we see this direction. The lights start to fade, flicker, and pulse. Oops, wrong button. That tells us, there's a lighting cue there. Again, like I said, a lot of times when those kind of directions are in, they're not necessarily from the author. They may be from the first production. They're as much a guideline as an actual instruction, but you know, the author intends for there to be some sort of significant shift in the mood, in the feel of the scene at that point, right? I'll continue scrolling. There's no indication that that changes, but when we get here, we see the lights are almost out, which tells us that if you are the lighting designer, that this fade, flicker, pulse needs to continue in a sort of gradual way to this point. It's a through line. It's not just that previous cue and this cue are two separate cues. It's that the one goes into the other, right? And then lights come up to full. And you've got that, and then you've got, we hear a crying from the baby monitor. So again, there's a sound cue, right? And then another lighting cue instruction. So your second read through, you're looking for those sorts of things, the things that are directly given to you in the script that say, these are things that need to happen on the stage to keep telling the story the way we want to tell it, right? So does that make sense? So we're looking at what needs to be there in the world of this show. Too many windows. All right. So these are some of the things you look for in your second reading is the location, time of day, environment, number of actors. Obviously, if you're the costume designer, knowing how many actors you have on the stage is an important thing for you. It doesn't do you any good to make 8 costumes for 10 actors, right? Physical traits of those actors. We know John and Marcia are middle-aged. That's about all they give us. Reading through that script too, there's really nothing that defines John and Marcia in a specific way beyond the author's note that they're middle-aged and that they have a child. So there's a lot that you can do with that. There's no real specific guidance. The sounds, like the baby crying, lights, props, anything the actors interact with is what you're looking for there, particularly in relation to your department. So if you are the lighting designer, obviously you're looking for lighting things. If you're the sound designer, you're looking for sound things. But if you're the lighting designer, you don't just want to ignore sound things, because if there are sound things that tie in with lighting, you're going to want to know, okay, these two things are supposed to happen together, so I need to coordinate with the sound designer to make sure, if it's a thunder and lightning thing, that being one of the most obvious times where lights and sound are together. It's like, is this storm supposed to be close or far? Where does my lighting cue for the lightning come in with the sound cue? Does the sound designer have in mind a long rolling peal of thunder, or a real sudden just like boom, shake the windows kind of thunder? What are we looking for there? So you do have to pay attention to the other department's design aspects. If you're the lighting designer, there's a couch and a chair that the actors are occupying. You're going to need to know, okay, I need to be able to light those areas in such a way that a person sitting or even potentially like laying back on the couch is still going to be well lit, right? So that view of the show is sort of at this level. You can see the building. You can see this is the fly house. This is the this is the stage. This is the theater. If you know our space, this is the theater. We've got a framework here that's got more structure to it. It's telling us what the world of this play is. So we've moved into a more detailed, more up close view of the world of the play. So does that make sense? Ellie did some research for us. The newest movie was Paycheck, released in 2003. The first iPhone came out in 2007. So it has to be at least from 2007 or later. All right, any questions before we move on to the third reading? All right, so the third reading is when we're reading it for design concept. This is where we start to get into the much more artistic realm of our design. We're looking at concepts, feelings, the backstory, fleshing out the world, what's going on beyond the actual physical and required information we have from the script, right? So coming back to our script here, we're looking at things like, their son never appears in the show, never really is part of what we're looking at in this story, right? But it influences the show, right? The fact that a lot of the dialogue and stuff centers around the son tells you something about the kind of people that John and Marcia are, right? You're also going to think about things like, Marcia is reading a book, they're just kind of hanging out in the living room. That sets a mood. This is when you start thinking about, if you're the props designer, what kind of furniture is there in this scene? If you're the scenic designer, what does this living room look like in terms of, like, how is it decorated? What are the wall colors? Are there windows? These are the sorts of thoughts you're starting to process here. We also know that Timmy is very young, both in terms of they've got the baby monitor, she's picking him up from preschool, that sort of thing. So you're looking at it, and again, you're thinking about the fact that, like, it's evening, so they're probably relaxing. You, as a designer, are thinking, okay, if you're the lighting designer, what time in the evening is it? Is it early evening where the sun is still up? Or is it right at sunset, which is going to influence the look of your lighting? Is it, later in the evening, after dinner, after they've done dishes, that sort of thing. So you're thinking about those sorts of thoughts, right? You're thinking about how their interaction is. You're thinking about where the furniture is on stage in relation to the two actors. Is there a coffee table? Are there bookshelves? We know that Marcia is curled up on the couch with a good book. People who sit and spend their evenings reading books probably have books in their living room, right? So these are the sorts of things you're looking for at this point. Is, what do I need to know to start building this world that our characters inhabit and that our audience is coming to visit, right? So the third time through, you're looking for those sorts of ideas. You're also looking at the mood of it. So as we go on, you feel that there's tension building in this, especially the more John kind of keeps naming off other actors, other movies, other things, and Marcia is getting frustrated that it's like, no, I'm trying to focus on this one thing. That could mean, if you're the lighting designer, you want a subtle shift in that light over that scene to make it, maybe you make it have more shadow or be a little bit dimmer or whatever you want to play with in order to sort of reinforce that level of tension. As a sound designer, you may want to start with just like regular sort of street noises and stuff that creates an ambience, and then as the tension builds, maybe you take that away so that the audience, again, possibly without even realizing it, starts to feel something is out of place, something is wrong in this world that we've been brought into, right? And then as we get to the end down here, where it starts shifting to the lights blinking and flashing, what is it that in this scene, from your point as a designer, that triggers that? Why do the lights start to fade and flicker? Like, what is going on? Is it the aliens? Or is it something else? Is it something psychological? Is it something deeper and more meaningful? Or, are there aliens messing with them? that's a decision you have to make as a designer and a design team and the director, what is going on here? And without guidance from a director or whatever, you have to start making those decisions, or at least realizing that those decisions have to be made so you can talk to the director and the other designers about their take on it. Because in the end, you're not working on your own. Theater is always collaborative. You're always working with other people. Even like a one-person show, a show with one actor that's directed by the actor, is still not fundamentally a one-person thing. If there's lights and there's sound, there's always at least two people, because it's not theater if you don't have an audience, right? So you've got your performer and your audience, at the very least, are making a collaboration. But most theater goes well beyond that, right? So those are the things you're looking at. You're looking at what is going on in the story. What are you doing? And usually for me, as I do this, I start taking notes. That's not the right tab. That's the right tab. I start taking notes on what this world looks like and what is going on in the world of the show. All right. So you're looking at, and when I mentioned backstory here, I'm talking about like, so Marcia picked up the child from preschool. Where was Marcia coming from? Like, what is her job? What does she do during the day while the baby's at preschool? What does John do day to day? Does he have a profession? Because that can influence your choices, both in terms of like costumes, but also in terms of how they interact and that sort of thing. And the other thing to be aware of is, obviously, as the costume designer, that's not really a decision for you to make at this point. That is a decision that the director and the actors will probably be making and that you have to work with. But you need to be aware that John and Marcia have a life outside of this room, and you have to sort of know what that life and what the rest of that world looks like so you can communicate it to the audience at some level. So we started off with the really wide, high-angle view of the world as a whole. We moved into the structure of the world, the framework, and then we finally get to the point where we're actually, in this case, on the stage with the world in front of us. We start to look at the details. For those of you who have not seen these pictures, which is probably most of you, this is from our production of Little Shop, which was the last production that North and Central did as a single production team. So now you've had to define beyond simply it's a New York tenement. You're looking at, we have to decide what color are the buildings, what shape and size are the bricks, the railings, that sort of thing. You have to start working out the details. What is the canopy over the door at the flower shop? Those are the kind of details you're working on and you're starting to get a grasp on for that third reading. All right. Any questions? All right. So that's when we get to what is your design concept. So the design concept is the overall look and feel of the show, the decisions you make as a designer to what the world looks like from your perspective as I tend to go to lighting design because that is what the bulk of my training in design is in. So I tend to be somebody who thinks in terms of lighting design mostly. But you're thinking about things like, for this show with John and Marcia, I would be thinking about, okay, it's a normally lit living room. There's no like real harsh shadows. There's no weird colors. It's going to be fairly naturalistic. I'm going to use warm light, mimic incandescent light. I don't want any harsh shadows. I don't want anything, really strong angles, anything like that. And then as the show goes on, I want to be able to ratchet up the tension, though, maybe by filling in some light that has some harder shadows and that sort of thing. So that's where you're looking at the design concept. And your design concept has to fit within the framework of your other designer's concept, because if the scenic designer is reading this and is thinking, okay, it's like an alien abduction sort of scenario, and they're thinking, I'm going to go over the top with a bunch of this stuff, but your lighting designer is thinking, I'm going to keep it natural and realistic, you've got a conflict there that becomes difficult, that if you don't resolve that conflict, is going to be jarring to your audience. So you want to make sure as you put it together that you're communicating among yourselves. So you're taking your guidance from the script, you're taking your guidance from the director, you're working collaboratively with the other designers to sort of narrow the concept down so that you're all living in the same world, as it were. So as you read a script, you do that first reading, you get to know what the story is, who the characters are, all of the basics of it. Then you read it again, looking for the things that are directly given to you in the script. This is also the point at which, if possible, you're going to have a discussion with the director about their interpretation of this world, because that's going to also give you a good, strong framework for it. And then finally, you're going to read through it looking for those design concepts, those overall, like, this is what I want things to look like. You start looking at the details. Who are the characters? What are the details of the world they live in? So you get to a point of being able to communicate that clearly and reference with your other designers and your director and the rest of the production staff what that is. So that is sort of, in a nutshell, the process of reading a script as a designer. Any questions? They're all so quiet, which is funny because I know several of you are not quiet in real life.
I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Evans.
All right, so hey, look, it's me. All right, see how I made myself fit in the little box? Cool, huh? You're all jealous of my technical wizardry. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we've looked at that script. I'm going to be giving you a link to another script for your it's totally not homework. It's work you do at home, right? So, but it's not homework. We're going to, I've linked this script on 10minuteplays.com that I found called The Brown Shoes. It's a little bit silly. It's a much less natural show. That's all I'm going to tell you about the show itself. But I will be, for the sake of this exercise, I will be your director, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I envision. This is I'm trying to do it without telling you too much of the script. So when you actually read the script the first time, you're doing it in that sort of raw audience unknowing way. You're looking at a world that is very, very mundane, very natural, very realistic, except for the parts that aren't, which once you read the script, that will make a little bit more sense. And the parts that aren't realistic and mundane, I want to take a little over the top. So you've got this opposition between normal, everyday, regular, the world we live in, and the world of this script. So that is my instructions to you as a director. So read that script, and then for next week, for next Tuesday when we meet, I would love it if you guys at some point between now and then would send me an email with your kind of design concept. You can choose whichever department of theater you are interested in. If you want to do it from the perspective of lights or sound or costumes or scenery, any of those, you get to choose. It's totally up to you. And again, I'm not looking for, we're not at the point of execution. So if you don't know what kind of lights do what sort of thing, that doesn't matter because we're not at that technical point yet. We will cover that in a future session, but you're starting with the concept. Excuse me. And so for that purpose, again, 5-10 sentences maximum is plenty. And if you have any questions or anything, feel free to let me know.